I call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. First, we'll start with a roll call. Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And I'm Councilor Cook, and I am present. The first thing on the agenda today is to review and approve the minutes from February 13th and February 27th meetings. Did everyone have an opportunity to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
And I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Oh,
They were thorough minutes, thank you.
yeah, very
Yeah.
thorough. Yeah.
They are. Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Right. Any opposed? None. Right, the minutes are approved. Today, we are continuing our discussion of donations policy. We have in the packet we have a draft donations policy and a red line version to look at. I'm going to scroll down in my packet so that everyone can see this at home, what the draft policy looks like.
You're going to go through the red line one or the,
Why don't we, so here's this is the red line version,
Yeah.
so I was forgetting which one was first. So we'll go through this red line version.
Yeah, I
so
think
that
that's
everybody
better.
can see the exact changes that are made when they're watching at home, and so that it's easier for everyone to follow. So, and I'm going to try to increase the size of this. I don't know if it's possible.
There you go.
There, so that it's easier for everyone to see. Okay. So if you'll notice, there are no changes here at the beginning. In 1 or 2 here at the very beginning. If there are any questions about that, just stop me. Either one of you, let me know if you have any questions or any changes that you want to suggest along the line that were not made, that we want to go back and make now.
And Chair, I'd be happy to explain some of the additional edits that you might see in here that arose after the last meeting when I got input and had some conversations with the finance director.
Wonderful, thank you.
So
So the
in fact, the
first,
blue, what is the blue?
yeah, I believe the blue is the first change here at 2.2.
correct.
We have an additional section E, and I'm going to ask our Deputy City Manager and Deputy City Attorney, Suzanne Woodland, to explain that for us.
Yeah, so one of the conversations we had in part at the last meeting was what about these trust instruments and how they're a little bit different. That sets up, as we talked about with the Terry Knowles article, being clear in terms of what's restricted or not. And one of the ways when we know something's permanently restricted is sometimes it is set up in a formal trust instrument, which always requires city council approval. And so I thought it would be useful just to take that conversation and make it clear that the trust instruments, as has always been the case, come forward to the city council just for clarity. So, and then if you'd like, I can keep walking.
That would be great. So then we get to 2.3, and there was a section struck.
Yeah, so this is an interesting conversation. So, as you know, there have been some recent and atypical for us kind of fundraising activities that were in which staff was much more involved than they have typically been in the past. So in the past, typically it was a third-party entity or a citizen group that was raising money for a particular project, and then a single check would come into the city of Portsmouth for purposes of whatever project. A playground would be like classic. And so that's how typically things had been done, or a trust instrument was set up, like with the African Burying Ground when we were obtaining funds to construct the African Burying Ground Memorial Park. So a formal trust instrument was set up. And then what we saw really in the last year or two was fundraising, which was taking place sort of as part of staff activities, which was then involving the handling of cash and ticket sales. And in conversation with the finance director, we discussed that we may be issuing new guidance on the sort of the management side of the house, that fundraising activities should really be done by a separate entity, absent special circumstances. So we thought it would be better off to take out references in here to monies from fundraising coming through here. Doesn't mean we couldn't still take them, because our definitions are broad enough if we get money. But we didn't want to set up the expectation that staff would be continuing in these fundraising roles. Now, keep in mind the school is a little different because of all the parent organizations. They are actually working on updating their own fundraising policy, because they have lots of parent organizations and student fundraising, and they have their own policy that they're in the process of updating on this very topic. And since we've kind of treated the schools separately because they have their own special needs, if you will, in terms of how that part of the organization operates, that just leaving that separate. But just so you're aware that they are looking at updating it to be in accord with best practices that they see on their end, and they have some special ways of dealing with that. So that's what's happening there.
I do have a question around that. I want to make sure that this, I think the goal of this policy is not to create a conflict for them.
Yep.
Or are we pretty confident
Correct.
this will not create a conflict for them?
Yes. Yes. And, we still have a little bit of time. I'm kind of getting spotty reports here and there, as I catch up with them. You owe me a comment. Because everyone's been busy working on budget and some other matters. So I've been kind of hounding them to say, is there an issue? But I will, once we finish today, I will once more send an updated draft, because they've got this, to say, are you good? If not, we can correct it, at the next level. But thus far, to the extent they've had an opportunity to look at it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. If there are no other questions, I want to move on to the section 2.5, the donation process. There is
Yep.
a change here as well.
Yep, and that's to emphasize that our preferred method is to have an outside entity or citizens group or neighborhood group do the fundraising activities, handle the ticket sales, the silent auction items, or however they're electing to raise money for that particular event, and then just that entity turn over the one check from that activity. So that's what the changes there reflect in that 2.4.
Okay. And then 2.5 is some restrictions. Yes.
Yep. And that's some additional language just blossoming, if you will, out of the conversation we had at the last meeting about wanting to make sure that there is clarity if there is going to be a restriction in terms of purpose and time. So.
Then down to section 3.1,
Yep.
general authority.
I took that language out and moved it to make it more prominent in a separate section about that it does, if donations are not accepted. So that's now got a section 8, declining donations.
Okay.
So that was
Yeah.
one of the suggestions, which is, hey, could we pull it out and put it in a new section? So that's what I did. So while the language may be crossed out in 3.1, you'll see there's a whole new section 8, which calls out declining donations.
Okay.
So,
The next section is section 3.3.
yep. And again, similar to the fundraising piece, just not that we, from administrative point of view, if we've got some kind of cash or other tangible that's a donation, we'd still deal with it, but just trying not to set up an expectation that we will be doing it.
Right, right.
So.
And I think this is a really positive change personally, when I look at this, because what we want to encourage people to do is to track that, use a fiscal agent
Yep.
where they can, that's a 501c3, where people can get credit for their donations.
Yep. Under section 6, I added language just to make it very clear that donations from certain persons and entities, such as a tobacco company, are not ineligible donors, but donations from such entities may require special attention. And I think that's what we had talked about at the last committee, is being clear. It's not a no, but let's be really thoughtful in those.
And who would be the decider in that?
City council.
Yeah.
I can envision, though, the school board also making some of these decisions
Yeah.
that affect schools or.
Or library board?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
police commission. Yeah, all those, yeah.
Well, the police commission, it goes through its process and then comes here if it's
Yeah.
over $100 here to the city council.
Right.
So, yep. And I think it helps just raise the attention. I think in some ways that's part of what a policy does.
Right, right. It's helpful because people need to understand that we are being mindful.
Yeah. Yep.
And it might be different, I mean, the police might have a different view on arms manufacturers than other departments.
Yep.
And it's really important to acknowledge that we have a major arms manufacturer
Yeah.
locally, so we
Yeah.
have to be thoughtful around that as well.
Yep. And then I added language about anti-discrimination. Because I know that was been a bit of a conversation lately, and I just thought we'd make clear that we generally don't run programs, but I thought it might not hurt to put some express language in there, because that might be helpful.
Well,
Right.
it's germane to right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
Well, and that's an area that I hadn't considered, that I thought was pertinent here, because some people make donations to run particular programs in schools, and the city shouldn't feel obligated to take funds and to accept certain programming.
like I said, that's why I was kind of crafting some language again. Sometimes it's the getting people to think about actually the consequences of accepting donations or running particular programs. It's just an awareness effort.
I guess what I thought about that, I mean, I think about Florida, for example, and, you know.
Do we have to?
Yeah, I know. But, I mean, so, I think, I don't know. I think like with the schools, that there is an effort to control what is taught at the schools, and how do we respond to that? I guess, and I don't know if it's in the donation policy. I mean, if people are donating things that are discriminatory, but are being pushed by some state legislation, how does that work?
Well, I know the school board does have its own policy, and like I said, they are reviewing elements of their policy right now, and I would expect if we had more activity that was problematic at the legislative, side of it, that we would see that in conversation at the school board, and certainly the school board has the ability to reach out to the city council, and of course is dependent, if you will, on the actions of the city council to fund the programs that it's programmed. So, yeah, I would expect it would be a conversation.
I bet it would be.
So in 8 is our new language to be
Declining donations.
Yep.
more express.
Clear and strong. Yep.
Yep, and then corrected, there was a good word change there for 9, because accepted is the word we want. And then, I had duplicative language you guys had pointed out, which I
Yes.
took out. And then under section 12, just again adding language based on our conversation at the last governance committee about being just very sensitive to, restricted versus unrestricted funds. And they are very sensitive upstairs in accounting about that. But I thought it would be good to just kind of flag that this is why it's good to know when we accept a donation or when the city council accepts a donation, does it have a restriction on it? And if so, specifically, what is it? So that the accounting staff can take the appropriate measures to make sure they properly track that donation.
Very good. I liked the change in section 13 as well, where it would change by the department to city.
Yep.
Because we don't know, the city manager should make that call and who
Yep.
writes those.
Good, thank you, I forgot that one.
That one's good.
I think that's it.
And yeah, that's it. So are there any questions?
I'm just quickly looking. One of the issues, the reason this was referred to us, if I'm not mistaken, was what's the threshold amount that the city council has to vote? And we're now sitting at 500, right?
We're sitting at 100 right
Oh,
now.
100. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so below 100, we don't have to,
And that'll
Make
be
that a vote.
done en masse and then a report.
in a report. Yeah.
Well, the city manager will accept them so that they can go right in and be used and distributed, if it's a little $25 gift card or something that's coming in. And then there'll be a quarterly report for those that are under 100 and under.
Right. Good.
So,
I think it's been improved. Would you say we're done?
I think that I would love to have a motion to approve the donation policy or move forward the donation policy from governance to the city council for review.
I'd move that.
Second?
Okay. Is there any discussion? All right.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. So the donation policy, with the changes, will now move forward to the city council. I will put it in the packet for our next council meeting. I would love to know if there's a preference on the part of this committee. I can ask to give the schools just another week. I can ask to include it in the packet for consideration at the next meeting.
I would do it in two, so just for consideration, and that might prompt just double checking with everyone before.
Okay. Does that
Before
work for
the actual
everyone here?
action.
Sure. Do we want to hold off till April for the council then, if we're going to have?
I would include it in the packet just as a notice that the governance committee is going to ask the council to consider
Right.
this proposed donation policy in the April.
Yep.
Does that make sense to you?
Perfect. Yeah, and then it's getting reviewed by the boards and commissions.
Right? All right. Right. Gives them just a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah. All right, so the next item on the agenda is new business. The cemetery committee
Yes.
has approached us with requested changes to their establishing ordinance. And I think I can lead off by prefacing this from what I've been told. There were concerns, and I've spoken with the chair of that committee around this. There were concerns around the appointment schedule because the cemetery committee is currently on an appointment schedule that aligns with a typical blue ribbon appointment schedule every 2 years, and everyone gets reappointed, which is atypical for our standing committees, and could lead to a complete changeover in the entire cemetery committee at the exact same time. So with that concern, they brought to us changes, and thank you to the deputy city manager, deputy city attorney, who's also their liaison, for bringing those forward to us. So I will go ahead and scroll down to those as well. Sorry for all the scrolling. There's quite a bit of scrolling today.
Yeah, and I would also add, so Susan Sterry, one of the co-chairs of the Cemetery Committee, could not be here this morning, so she has asked me to speak on behalf of the committee. The committee has had a difficult time meeting quorum. So in addition to creating a stagger, which is one of the changes requested, the other change would be to basically make the membership smaller so that it can make quorum. So right now, there are only 10 members of the cemetery committee, but given the way the existing ordinance is written, they need 7 to have a quorum. So they have had a very difficult time making quorum. That being said, they have been meeting but not taking action, and they've been doing lots of actually good work in terms of cleaning headstones, getting the word out, working with Public Works on various projects. They managed to get a Moose Plate grant. So there have been a core group of members who've been very active and I think effective in kind of achieving their goals and bringing attention to these.
That's a lot.
And so they worked with Bob Sullivan to come up with these changes. So it would change the number of members between 7 and 11. So we thought that would help them be able to then make quorum. So if they wind up only having 7 members, then they've got their quorum of 4. So.
And I was going to ask a question around that, because a lot of our committees are very defined. It's an exact number of members rather
Yep.
than a range,
Yep.
which seems to be unusual in the ordinance. Is there a reason why they want a range?
I think the value in this case of a range is it's really hard to tell how much interest there is. So right now there are 10 members, and the way this ordinance is set up is that the cemetery committee membership would sunset, except the mayor, if you look at the final paragraph, would allow the existing members to reapply, and the mayor would consider those reapplications first to the committee. So it's a way to kind of keep for those that want to continue to stay on, it would do that. And what happens with the quorum is that it floats. So if you have 7 members, then you'll have a quorum of 4. If you have 11 members, then you're going to have that quorum of 6. So the quorum will float depending on how much interest and energy. So Bob was good with still having that range for that flexibility because the quorum number will automatically float under New Hampshire law. So. And you'll see the way we fix the stagger in here is that the first, 4 members shall be appointed for 3-year terms, and then all remaining are 2-year terms.
And then it continues on a 2-year term.
Then it continues 2 years after that, so you only have a 3-year term
to
at
begin
the
with.
outset, and then it falls back to 2. So if you get 7 members, you'll have 4 members that are reappointed for the 3-year term, and then 3 members for that 2-year term, and so you're always going to have 4 and 3 in your cycle.
Now, here's my question. If you get to 11, though, you're going to have 4 and
You would.
7.
I don't think we're going to have 11
Okay.
right now, given that right now we only have 10, and I'm expecting that if this change goes through, there may be 1 or 2 who decide that, they've had a hard time making meetings, they have other business. That's our sense, is that actually we're probably going to have, more on the 7 range,
Okay.
at least for right now.
Okay.
But it's a good question. We've been kind of noodling that out a little bit, but that's what we're anticipating.
Okay. Yeah, because I first saw this, I thought maybe we should have 5 so that it's closer, it's like a split. But,
Yeah, we think we'll probably lose a couple,
okay. Okay.
just because they've been missing a lot of meetings, and determined that maybe they could just participate in a project as opposed to being at a meeting and part of that governance effort.
I was going to say that I think this is the type of activity that attracts a volunteer for doing the work rather than
Yeah.
governing the committee.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I had another question around appointments.
Yep.
Does this envision that people are all reappointed once this ordinance change is readopted? Is that the goal?
Yes, so the goal is, the mayor shall thereafter reappoint the members of the committee until all existing members have been offered the opportunity for reappointment. So that is the language that is part of the resolution to make these changes,
Right.
so that no one would lose their opportunity to continue serving out, if you will, because the term would end at the end of this year, in December of this year, and everyone's term would end. So this gives people the opportunity, if this passes through the ordinance process, through the city council, maybe it's summertime, and this gets through the whole process, I think we're going to see, like I said, people making decisions about whether they want to reapply or not. And maybe this might bring some more attention again to their work, so maybe they get a new member or two, as others who found that they're too busy right now to participate,
So,
make different decisions.
good. When the Cable Commission came to us,
Yep.
I think they had a vote from that committee supporting the changes. Have we got that from the cemetery committee?
They have not been able to make quorum for the last 4 meetings. So consequently, what we've got is the members who have been at the various meetings all saying, this is great, we need this. But they have not been able to take a formal vote because they've been not able to make quorum. So has there been any objection from any of the committee members? No. Have they all at some point seen this? Yes.
Okay, yeah.
But that's why we wanted to move it forward, because it's been really hard to make that quorum, and yet they're doing a lot of good work. So,
Yeah, no, we need to
yeah.
bring their number down.
But there have been
so
no
that-
objections. They've all seen it, and
That
everyone
was my question.
concurs
Yeah.
that a change to help them be more effective would be really helpful.
So this really should come out of the governance committee, because we can make quorum to vote to move it
I
forward.
think that would be lovely.
Okay.
If you were to have some change, then I'd want to take it back. But if you otherwise don't have a change, my suggestion is move this forward, and we'd be able to make the same representation. And, maybe they'll get, maybe next month they'll be lucky and get their quorum and be able to take, oh, yes, an affirmative. But in case not, it would be nice to get this moved forward for them.
I think my only additional concern was around the mayor shall thereafter appoint. I just want to make sure that that language doesn't somehow stay with the ordinance beyond the initial changes, because I wouldn't want to tie a
Yep.
mayor's hands
Yep.
on appointments.
No, you'll see it comes after when you look at how this is structured, you'll see it's at the very last paragraph. In fact, it's the last sentence. So it says, this ordinance shall take effect upon its passage, and be it further ordained that on adoption of the amendment, the terms of all existing members of the cemetery committee shall be terminated. The mayor shall thereafter reappoint the members to the committee until all existing members have been offered the opportunity for reappointment. So that's kind of like a housekeeping direction, kind of like when it takes effect. So that's the goal. What changes is the section A
Right.
in the article, but that other language is just the implementation part, kind of like the re-alphabetizing and.
Exactly. I just want to make sure there's no confusion that that's somehow being added to the ordinance.
No, it is not. It's direction to the mayor on how to help them transition.
Okay.
and should that actually say the mayor shall recommend and the council shall?
I think we presumed it's going to go through its usual process.
It doesn't say that. I
You're
guess
right,
that's-
it doesn't. Shall thereafter reappoint the members of the committee, I'll just add with the approval of the council.
Yeah.
Okay.
That does not need to go back to
No,
cemetery committee.
I
does
think
it?
that's, because that's directive.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or concerns on these changes, recommended changes?
Just for context, how many years have we had a cemetery committee?
So we had a blue ribbon committee for about 6 to 9 months. And then at the end of the last council, in that November, December time period, recognizing that the blue ribbon committee, would end, they put together the cemetery committee in ordinance form.
Right, and I think there's some state law about towns and cities should have a cemetery committee, but at any rate, that's helpful. That helps me understand,
Yeah.
helps us understand the history of this. They need a smaller number so they can meet quorum.
Yeah. Yep. And to have that stagger so that they don't lose potentially all of the expertise. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you've been cognizant of the importance of stagger, so that you keep some group that has that history of the committee's work and practices.
And I should say here, in relation to this, this committee had been working on the administrative ordinance, which includes this part of the administrative ordinance, and we're likely, I don't think that any final decisions have been made about how to approach this at legal, but it's very likely we're to see this coming forward from several of the committees who have a stagger that's off, rather than addressing it as a ordinance-wide recommendation, having individual committees come forward with how they want their stagger fixed.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
We're likely to see that as the next pass. So this might be the first
Right.
of several.
Good.
Yeah.
But that's good. So there's more than one way sometimes to
Yeah.
move these along, so I think the committee would be very happy if they could have quorum and take more formal action, and, because they're doing so much.
So I would move that we approve the proposed changes on the cemetery ordinance.
Okay, as amended, with
As
that
amended.
additional language.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. As seeing none opposed, we will move the changes to the cemetery ordinance forward to the city council for review as well. And again, I will include this in the city council packet with a request to consider this in the April meeting,
Yep, for first reading in April.
first reading. And we will ask then at the April meeting to have the chair of the cemetery committee present
Yeah.
to help present this to the council.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if possible, if they could have a vote, if they do get a quorum.
Yes.
Okay, and so the agenda is fairly light today. So the next thing we have is public comment, and I don't see any members of the public here or even on Zoom to comment. With that, we'll go directly to announcements. Our current committee schedule would mean that we will get to conflicts of interest at our next committee meeting. And now that we've moved forward the donations policy, I think we're well positioned as a committee to take on the next big task. And we will revisit parks, just an update on parks. You notice the administrative ordinance changes are not here, and they're not here today, and they could be in that March 27th timeframe or April 10th, but legal legal has quite a bit on their plate, and so I'm giving
really?
them a little bit of a break because it's really their task to research and consider the current changes. That's where it's sitting, and they've been doing enough by doing just the donations policy for us. So, so we'll discuss conflict of interest in parks, and then continue our discussion of conflict of interest, which I assume will take us several sessions because it's several pieces of ordinance, and talk about blue ribbon committee conversions starting April the 10th. If it's okay with this committee, I was planning to go ahead and reach out to the blue ribbon committees that we talked about at our last meeting, that are potentially should be transitioned in ordinance, just to ask them to consider that so that we have something to discuss April the 10th. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think the more it comes up from the ground up, the better off we are, as opposed to us wand waving.
Yes. Thank you, Counselor. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's better if others suggest and are interested in doing that. Are there any other announcements, or is there anything else that anyone
Well,
wants to
just a
raise?
reminder, I'm going to be on vacation on the 27th.
Okay.
I should be able to Zoom in. I don't know the quality of we're staying at I always forget these things, what Airbnb, or there's other things, but it's the other thing, whatever it is.
VRBO.
Huh? VRBO, yeah. So we're staying at that. I don't know the quality of the internet connection there.
Okay.
So I can probably call you on Sunday when we're arriving there and let you know. But
Okay.
I could also just go participate by telephone too.
Okay.
That was going to be my
Thank you.
suggestion. If the signal is not strong, you can always, that's the way we used to do it. Just
Right.
participate by phone
Yeah.
if needed. Yeah.
And the good thing is that we're not going to be making any decisions. I think at our next meeting, we don't have anything before the committee that requires a decision. So,
Oh, conflict of interest?
well, we're going to discuss it.
To discuss it, yeah.
We're going to begin that discussion. I think that's going to be a very long
Yeah.
discussion. So,
Yeah, I was interested to read about the vote in Rochester on their
Yes.
ethics ordinance and how the pros and cons. It was a split vote. You know,
yes.
a lot of it is, as we know, covered by state statute. So it's how far do you go beyond state statute?
Exactly. It's this will be a fairly long discussion. We actually there was a person that contacted me when we first were discussing the ethics ordinance around specifically the conflict of interest section, which we had not addressed, that I plan to reach out to and potentially invite, not to the March 27th meeting, but to the April 10th meeting, to see if he can come in and, or at least attend via Zoom and share his thoughts, who has significant expertise on conflict of interest. So I would like to do that. He actually spoke to the council at the time also when we were considering the ethics ordinance. So, so I will do that as well, but not until the April 10th meeting. We'll just start the discussion so we can go over everything that needs to be discussed. So if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.